there are two particular things about support in our world of support at Gen that are really important to us, and it's important to all entrepreneurs. And the first is obviously money and early stage capital. And we do a variety of things, but perhaps the most important is the Global Business Angels Network. And there's just two things I wanted to do on that in just a moment. The other is we try to do things exponentially. And so in a moment, I'm just going to ask you guys some questions about why you are here and what you've got to do with Gen. But before we get started with that, I would like to just, if I could, ask you, Candace, can you tell us very quickly about GBEN? And can you give us some other perspectives on sort of what's going on in the early stage capital environment?
Early stage investing, they have to remember that you're not only talking about financial capital, you're talking about human capital, about societal capital. And this is why I love angel investing and why I think that it is so important for entrepreneurs. Because the only way that entrepreneurs can get that human capital, that financial capital, that knowledge capital, that transfer of knowledge is from a business angel. And so in that thinking, you very wisely, Jonathan, 4 years ago, felt that Gen needed to have the angel investment support of human, of financial, of this transfer of knowledge. And so we started the GBAN, the Global Business Angel Network. And I'm so happy, that we have been able to do that. And really, it is absolutely in the lines of Gen, that you're always doing everything you can to support the entrepreneur and to give the entrepreneur the best chance for success. And so in each of the countries where there is a Gen, there is usually now a national angel member who is there to work with the entrepreneurship network in that particular country to help them with mentoring, to help them with pitching, to help them put what you were talking about with the Gen Connect, to put that, a person who can help, who can make, give a call and say, why don't you use this fantastic entrepreneur's, products or services in your company or whatever. So we're very excited. We will be having on Wednesday, we will be having the GBAN annual meeting, so the Global Business Angel Network meeting. We're looking forward to welcoming everybody. And I will just finish by saying I do Skype, so every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. my time, I do Skypes with entrepreneurs from around the world. Sometimes this means they're getting up at midnight so that they can Skype with me. Sometimes it means that they're it's my midnight in their place. But I started this about 6 years ago, and one of the mentorees that I started with was from New Zealand. And it was two mentorees from New Zealand, and they wanted to have internet connectivity via satellite. And that is also why I'm very proud to be with these two gentlemen who will tell you a little bit later about what they're doing. And so we started, and within 2 years, we created the Oceania Women's Network satellite. We have our own satellite going to all of the Pacific Islands, bringing high-throughput internet connectivity. And it's only women. So this is really, really fun. Cool. So this is what, mentoring, angel investing, human capital transfer can bring about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Candace. And I know that you've been instrumental in so many ways in this industry. But you also run eBAN.
Of course, absolutely, very proud.
But one of the things, and at Kaufman, we created something called the Angel Capital Association, which has become perhaps the dominant voice of angel investor community in the United States. And one of the things one of the perceptions that people have is that the angel investor world is really in Europe and the United States, which we're trying to dispel that myth. And we thought, what better way to do it than, Padmaja, to have you kind of tell us a little bit about, what's happening in the angel investor world in India. And we want to publicly thank you for joining the board of GBAN, because we hope to have your leadership in helping us to think in, no disrespect, Candace, but in a non-Anglo-Saxon way, or Anglo-European way, rather, in terms of how we're thinking.
Not only that, but in a Padmaja way, because we learned
Yes.
so much from her. The real
Absolutely.
transfer of knowledge is from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me on the GBAN board. In India, we usually respect everybody by folding our hands, so that was what it meant. India is really growing, honestly. It's probably the fastest growing startup nation in the world. I'll just give you one example, and that should tell you. Each year, last year we got 12,000 business plans in a year. And we invested in 40 deals. And it's almost like 1 in every 10 days, just one angel group. So you can think how fast it's growing. But I think what is even more important, because India is a conglomerate of many regions. I mean, the north is very unlike the south, and the east is very unlike the west. So we actually work with very diverse and very different customer segments, different entrepreneurs, different needs. Everything is very different. And to me, why GBAN and Gen resonated with me so much was because we were working in a mini Gen in India, because it was not global entrepreneurship network, it was Indian entrepreneurship network, but we were grappling with our own issues of different types of entrepreneurs, different issues, different policies, different market issues. So to me, Gen and GBAN sort of resonated immediately to say, listen, we need to move into not only global, but geography agnostic is, to me, the most important thing, because entrepreneurs and investors chase big businesses, and we build them, we start them, we build them, we scale them. And for investors, it makes absolute sense to just chase the best deals. I mean, I'm being so candid. The second thing that resonated with me, and in the startup ecosystem itself, I think what is very, very powerful is not money. Honestly. Actually, I like entrepreneurs who are not raising money. If they're building the top line, I want to be chasing them, not the other way around. So I think by creating this kind of a global network, be it GBAN, be it Gen, I'm not being specific, I think our job as catalysts, if I may say, is to actually create these companies where they don't want money or they don't need money, because they will be really the most valuable companies that we'll create. And we could, in different ways, help them by mentoring them, providing them global market access. And yes, if they need money, we should provide them. So I'll give you one example just to give you an idea. At IEN, we invested in a company at $1 million valuation about 9 years ago. That company has gone global. It has partnered with all the majors globally, and it's tracking at about $800 to $900 million valuation today. Wow. Just raising money, yes, but just focused on the business. And I think the value that we brought, which is what is more important, is when it was $1 million valuation, India was not internet savvy as it is today. Let me also make that clear. We had to teach the entrepreneur how to do online customer acquisition. And we brought in NASA as its very first, small but a very significant client. And I think that sort of personifies what I believe, whether it's a Gen or a GBAN, brings that money, mentoring, and market access. And I think together, all of us here, when we meet in conferences like this, for me, is to build these relationships, build the trust, understand each other's cultures, our issues, our frameworks, our advantages. And I think together we will build what I believe is very important for all of us, because if we don't build young entrepreneurs and we don't build businesses and we don't create job creators, I think what we will create, and I feel very strongly about this, we will create something which is a different industry called the industry of terrorism. So we have to create jobs, and this probably is the path to do it.
And if I may, just 2 points. My father, who was one of the founders of the Israeli venture capital community, always said, if you do not invest in the next generation, you will have the lost generation. And the second thing, just to underline that global aspect, is that, you know, here I'm an American, I was living in France and Belgium and Luxembourg, and you know, saying, okay, we're going to get together a women angel network in the Pacific Islands, women who had never ever invested before, and people are saying, Candace, you know, what the hell are you doing? Why don't you invest in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. Our first satellite we bought in America. Our second satellite we're buying in Europe, you know, and this is a Pacific, you know, so this is a global company, and the GEN and the GBAN, this is really so important. So
No, absolutely, and I think it's all important in India. Actually, very surprisingly, we are more traditional as a society, but I think it's completely gender agnostic when we look at entrepreneurs and angel investors. And I think that's a very, very big comment coming from the kind of society that we are. So I think it's a changing world.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I want to stress we have the Global Business Angels Network annual meeting, which you're all invited to this week. And I think there will be a chance for you to dig a lot deeper on these questions. But I will really emphasize one important thing that I've heard, and that's that we're about making it possible for communities that currently don't have a very robust angel investor capacity to learn from those that do. But also, as Candace has constantly emphasized in her leadership with GBAN, is a way that we can increase that amount of cross-border investing. We know that you know, innovation doesn't get worried by national boundaries, and we very much appreciate your leadership. I know, Candace, you're going to be shifting to emeritus status now. You've got us off and running.
Yes.
And I don't know whether we can publicly announce that, but I know Candace is going to be aggressively and actively involved in the GEN network overall, but I think we're going to expand your role beyond just GBAN. But and Padmaja, we're really grateful for you being willing to do this, because I know I talked to some of the other people in India, and they said you're probably one of the busiest people, so we didn't think we would get your attention. So we want to thank you for that. So
Thank you.
dig further at the GBAN meeting. I hope you'll come, and thank you very much, both of you. I'm going to invite you both to stay up here for this, if you wish, because you both got a connection to this.
Exactly.
And in fact, you know, Stephan Reckie came to us because of the fact that you understood GBAN and you're an investor.
Absolutely.
So you're going to talk to us about investing or something else?
No, well, that's actually...
We're really excited to have you here.
Well, it's a great segue. So as I started an angel network 6 years ago with a good friend of mine from high school, all trust-based, and it's global. And I heard about GBAN, and I heard about the opportunity to come to South Africa last year. So I came, had a great time, and was blown away by the fact that so many countries were represented through GEN. And I was trying to find a home for myself. GBAN was great, it was moving forward, and I thought about it. And we've invested in a couple of companies that do business in space. So I said, and I approached actually Candace about this at one of the GBAN events, said, is there any focus on space? And she told me about EBAN Space, and had the honor of joining EBAN Space on the executive committee. And by the way, Candace is part of GEN Space as well. You said you guys. There's actually a lot of folks in the room as well as part of the committee. So I thought about it and said, how can I integrate space into what GEN is doing? And thinking about doing business in space, if you treat it as a location to do business, it fits in the model that you have established for GEN. So looking at how things are working at GEN, I said, let me think of a cool way to model it. And it's really big. So space really has no borders. And the fact that it has no borders means you really can't designate on top of which country do you put GEN Space. So come up with the idea of putting together an executive board with representation in every continent in the world. And those folks have the pleasure of mapping out the ecosystem for people that do business in space in those continents. So clean and simple, but trying to add value. So putting together a network for the sake of putting together a password-based network is not exciting for me. And I know that doesn't exist at GEN. It's really figuring out how do you share best practices. And what's going on in space is there still is a space race, right? There's competition in terms of entrepreneurship, and there's actually legal restrictions on companies exchanging information in space, right? The government has different protections. So I'm not saying break those legal restrictions, but share the best practices. And then, as you develop the best way to do business in space, you can pull in the investors, you can pull in the customers. Ideally, the founders become customers of each other. So it's really going to be a really exciting ecosystem.
Fantastic. And we're going to pretty much announce this tomorrow on the big stage, Gen Space. And the cool thing is that we're sort of talking about it pre here because we want you to have a chance to get involved in it. And we're very lucky that Candace brings an equal level of sophistication into this. I mean, I think you're probably you're one of the very first space investors.
Well, a space entrepreneur. Space entrepreneur. I was dubbed the Satyr Lady, which makes me very happy. And, you know, I do, by The Economist, I do think that, you know, just to kind of pick up on what, you know, Stephan is talking about, what I've never done a government-supported space program. I've always only done private satellites and private launchers. I actually did the first private launcher 20 years ago in 1995, before Elon Musk. But
and Jeff Bezos.
And Jeff
Richard
Bezos,
Branson,
yes,
right?
exactly. But which are all fantastic people. The thing about working in space that I believe is the most exciting is that we really can cooperate and we can create peace together. And this is like entrepreneurship.
Right.
And so it is a beautiful place to work.
You know, it's hard though for any of us to have this conversation because is there anybody in the room that's actually been to space? Is there any of you left the Earth's atmosphere? Do we think we know enough about this? I think there is one person in the room. We are very honored to have with us a real live astronaut. So tell us about yourself and tell us, is this true? I mean, do you feel different once you've been up there? Does the world look different? Do you have a different perspective?
I'm going to start talking about you, Jonathan. I am so impressed with this conference. I've been to dozens of conferences. In my last job, planned several conferences for the ISS National Laboratory, and this has been so engaging. And I've taken so many notes. I'm here to learn. I've met so many interesting people from around the planet, and learned a lot about Africa. At the reception last night, there was a contingent from Bermuda. Learned a lot about what they're doing in Bermuda, and I'm looking forward to talking to each and every one of you. You've got a brilliant, incredibly talented group here, and I'm here to learn and try to help. I heard things like failure is an option. Failure is an option. Isn't that ironic? Because where I came from, failure was not an option. Which is exactly why NASA and the world's space program needs your help. As I looked at the planet, because you did ask the question, I really didn't start answering it yet. What occurred to me was there are no borders. And on the space station, between countries, right? There's no borders. You could see some outlines of different areas. But in general, you get the sense that we're just one beautiful planet that we live on, and we're lucky. And you get the sense of why are people fighting down there? Religion, water, territory, whatever it is, we shouldn't be fighting. We should be working together. And also taking care of our planet. The sense that the planet is a spaceship, spaceship Earth. And there's so many passengers on spaceship Earth, and how many more crew members we can recruit to take care of the planet and take care of each other. And so the mission is amazing to me. I'm having a great time. Everyone has a smile on their face. because what you do is changing the world. And I'm really excited to be here at my first Gen conference. It's not going to be my last. I guarantee you. We're going to jump in on this thing with this new group, Gen Space, which it is a location. When we as a civilization need to move off the planet at some point and colonize other parts of the solar system, the space station is an outpost. It's been up there for 18 years. The kids in high school now, their whole lives, we've had people living and working in space 24/7. Now, we don't want to do too good, because then you might have to change the name of Gen. It might have to be like the, interstellar, or galactic. But anyway, I didn't mean to talk so long, but I'm really, really excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. It really is. We are just really honored that you took the time to come in person. And, so Greg Johnson, of course, is a real live astronaut. He's flown shuttle missions and knows what it's like to be up in space. But, you're also someone that brings the perspective of understanding the concept of an ecosystem. And I'm very glad to hear that sort of resonated with you. So tell me either or both of you, please. So what do you think is the potential for the new space industry? I mean, we're thinking here, Gen Space. We're part of enabling entrepreneurs. So can you give me a couple of examples? Because I think there's some people in the room that might not be familiar with how space is already becoming a reality in the entrepreneurship world.
Well, first of all, the aspects of satellites, that's been around for, I won't say forever, right?
For the last 60 years.
For the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Satellites now get replaced by CubeSats, nanosats, microsats, all the different tiny little satellites that eliminate huge costs of just the service, and they're replaceable. So it's going to give ubiquitous internet to the world, just access to data, Earth imaging that you can do in terms of, and Greg, you probably have the whole list of things that can go up from space.
Well, I'll just mention the second one, and that is the International Space Station. For the last 5 years, and actually I just left last month. I'm freelancing now, and I'm looking into new things, and
Are you interviewing?
What? No. But no, I think it's going to be a bunch of small jobs as opposed to one big job. But the space station, over the last 7-10 years, NASA and the international partners have definitely made a push to turn at least a portion of the space station in not just an outpost to get to explore, to understand long-duration space flight and then to go beyond to cislunar space or wherever, but it's also to solve problems here on the Earth and develop the space station as an innovative platform, an innovation platform, and trick it out with facilities, things that you can't do here on the Earth. It's a national laboratory. And so we've grown from what we had one commercial service provider, NanoRacks, when we started working together. See, we've worked together for 5 years on this, and he helped build our investor network, which was basically Shark Tanks at our annual conference, just bringing ideas together. And now on the space station, there are 8 commercial service providers, and they're not huge companies. Most of them are startups, but they're doing new things in space and creating business models. And it's very different than being in India, though, because it's hard to get up there. It's an expensive trip there, even more expensive than going to India. And it's really expensive to operate the facility. So we need to use get the best ideas up there, and that's exactly what this investor network is
Very
doing with these young startups.
Very interesting. In fact, in India, we're really looking at it very sharply. So we just built our Mangalyaan, the spaceship that went to Mars, at about a third of the cost that was there earlier. So space is also in India growing very rapidly. There's a huge push, by the way, from the government as well. So we should talk how we could get other countries involved.
And this is exactly why we're here, is we love the fact that you just recommended that. And can I mention a call to action?
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
The call to action is, talk to us. Because we're global, I can see us being in conversation the rest of the week. We want to hear, we want to attract, that's why we're trying to get the footprints of at least some of the executive committee or board across the globe, but we welcome those kind of
No,
conversations.
absolutely. And I'll just respond to the call to action, because we have angels and investors,
Right.
later stage, who are looking at it in India specifically. So
And
happy to actually engage.
Wait,
And if I may, just 2 points. One, my father also actually was amongst the first people to do the first satellite, working with President Kennedy and President Johnson in the United States White House. He told me at the time, he said, Candace, when we first launched the satellites, everybody said, well, what are we going to do with it? And from that point on, then there were so many applications that could be done. When I suggested to the Prime Minister of Luxembourg in 1983 that they have their own satellite system, which is today the world's largest satellite system, SES, he said, but Candace, we know nothing about satellites. We have no people who are doing space. What that did, and our friend from Startup Mexico came to me yesterday and said, Candace, I really, really want to get into space. And he said, but we don't know anything about it. And I said, actually, that is probably the best advantage that you could have. Because today, space is being reinvented. And it is the countries who can, have their youth do CubeSats, do nanosats, go to the moon, build a rocket that will go to Mars, et cetera, with robotics, with AI, et cetera. So actually not being, in the former space, or, new space 1.0, but now each country can have their own, and this is a little bit what Stephan was talking about, they can have their own space industry, which can be on a variety of things, be it Earth observation, big data, artificial intelligence, robotics, you name it.
Fantastic. And I think we've got people like Elon Musk, inspiring us in the really sort of glamorous parts of these things. But I think the important part to remember here is that we're talking about all sorts of potential new industries. This business of knowledge, I remember when I first went to Russia, I was so confused because I was a young man working on issues, and I got this invitation to go literally and visit the Politburo members in Russia, and I'd never been to Russia. I was 25 years old, and they said, "Will you come?" And I was scared because in those days you didn't go to Russia, and I actually called my dad, who was a submarine captain who knew a lot of Russians because he used to play hooky with them under the ocean. They would cat and dog races. And he said, well, I think you should go. And I went, and I said, I don't understand. I'm not a Sovietologist. In this days, it was the Soviet Union. I don't know anything about it. And they said, exactly why we want you to come here, because we're going to think completely differently. This was the beginning of Glasnost. I ended up going over there and living over there and essentially spending some time opening a center that was going to bring in microfiche libraries about what they called constitutional democracy. We went over there and we spent a lot of time, but the reason they picked me is because I did know nothing about it. So I think that's a very valuable point. But I want to really stress, I think there's great potential here for us for all of the Gen community. I want to stress we should make sure, as far as India is concerned, we have a very strong delegation.
Well, and India has done so well. I mean, it really is, when I was doing Iridium, and we picked you to, launch some of our rockets, some of our satellites. I mean, at the beginning, you were just getting started, and you've come so far. You've surpassed everybody else. Absolutely.
Yeah. There is a push. There is a push from the government. There is a push from the private sector. And there's a push from individuals, by the way. So that is where it sort of seeps in.
and one more thing. So it's about future workforce too. You mentioned that, Candace. This is really important. I don't want to say old space because people get upset because it's old people, but you really need to
Traditional space.
traditional space, right?
We've got
But yeah, I dyed my hair, I think. But you have to stress that the young people can get involved in space by just doing an app, using data from space.
Yeah.
So it's open to all, and it's open to developing countries, to developed countries, however you want to spread it. And that's the cool part about space. That's what excites me about just helping kick this off. So I think we have a lot of momentum.
Great
Well,
idea.
thank you. We're with this, and we'll look forward to expanding this conversation to the bigger audience of the Congress.